you, you know, appear completely, you know, whether or not your camera is on, whether or not you're mute. I really don't know where to go with it, but it's a whole different kind of, you know, entering, and we call them rooms, you know, they aren't, I mean, they could be screens or something, but
Right. Right. Thinking about a piece of Oliver Sacks's work called A Leg to Stand On. I don't know whether you have read that work or not. A devastating injury that he did to himself. Well, he had a skiing accident, and he really hurt his leg very badly. And it's a whole story about how it is that he regained and reclaimed his leg, which for a time didn't even feel like it was a part of himself. And then there's a whole extended reflection on convalescence and some reflections on admission and what it means to be admitted to a hospital and what it means to admit that you need to be admitted to a hospital. And what are the stages of getting back to your life, and can you reclaim your clothing and reclaim your place in society. And I'm not quite there yet, and I'm not in the hospital, and I'm not back at home, and I'm in a convalescent home, let's say, or some place to rehab me for what? So I can get back to the world. It's convalent. You know, there are these two valences that are going on. You're both a patient and not a patient at the same time, and both a participant in the real world and not. So those are interesting sort of Hiroshima, interesting commentaries on what it is that you're suggesting right now. That we have doors, we have thresholds. I guess we should just start, Jenna. I don't even know whether you started to record this or not, but no, you did.
It started getting so interesting, so I just jumped in. I didn't want to
okay. Okay, good for you.
Before you start, Steve, Jenna, I did send you an email with a link in it for yesterday. I hope you can cut and paste it into here. And I also wanted to welcome a few new faces of people we haven't seen before from different parts of our community, and from Trinity Presbyterian and beyond. So this is great. Glad to have you.
Yeah, yeah. And let's not forget about our mom in residence, Andrea Graber.
Hi, Andrea.
The rabbi's mom in residence.
You just hang out with rabbis all the time, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I've said it before, and we could say it about a number of different things, that a particular thing begs for the metaphor, or slides easily, or is hinged to the metaphor, or as I like to say, it's where the meta meets the for. For comes from the Greek pherein, which means to carry something. Fer, like transfer and suffer and confer and so on. The fur is the carrying part of it. How far can you carry it? You know, the fur is the carrying part of it, and the meta is is above. So it's carrying the image, and the image is teaching us something, but it's teaching us about something that is beyond the thing itself. It is, and there are some things like doors, like doorways, thresholds, that are architectural elements and also structural elements of our imaginal life, let's say. And we really can't have one without the other. So threshold becomes a threshold of pain, a threshold of tolerance, a threshold of psychological threshold. I don't know, fill in the blank, but threshold is one of those words. And door and room is one also. There's a French philosopher named Bachelard who wrote a book called The Poetics of Space. poetics of space, which is an extended reflection on things like attic or basement. The places where we live, that we inhabit and that inhabit us. So here we are with a text in front of us that is the first of a number of Elijah texts that we'll be able to look at before Pesach, because Elijah, if you want to say that there's a patron saint of the door in the Jewish tradition, we would have to say that the patron saint of the door would be Elijah. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Elijah is a liminal character. Liminal, Lyman is the Latin word for threshold. So liminal and subliminal and so on. He is a liminal experience. He is both in this world and in another world. He is both on this side and that side. He is in and out where they are hinged together. He's the world inside the house or the world inside us, just like he is the world that is beyond us. He sees and speaks to life on this side of the screen, this side of the pargod, as the rabbis would say, and on the other side as well, this side of the veil and the other side of the veil. And he listens carefully to this one. And the rules of the game seem to be that he's not supposed to disclose certain insider trading information on the other side. But when he does, like Prometheus in one version of that myth, he gets punished for it. So you want to say he's on our side? Yeah, I think he is on our side. He knows how valuable is the information that he has on this for folks who inhabit the world in which he was a prophet. So the text that we have is actually a text that sees him at the door and sees the redemptive possibilities. If not the door, sometimes, well, let me back up and take a deep breath here and say, there are plenty of rabbinic texts where Elijah appears at the door of a house, at the entrance of a cave. Sometimes it's a delet, sometimes it's called petach or sha'ar. But Elijah, in a good number of the stories in which we have Elijah figuring prominently, he appears, at least initially, in the doorway, at the opening, in the gate. And that's the case with this story that I think we should read. What do you think? Thank you, Rachel Beth. Oh, you can see it in the Aramaic at the top. And I always love having the original language there because sometimes it's useful for us. And always it gives our eyes the chance to sort of run over and caress the text a little bit, just to see that there is an original to the text. There's a texture to the text. Underneath, we have it in English, and it is that where we will spend all of our time together. And next to it, a picture of the opening of a cave. It might be a burial cave. It might be the cave of Shimon Bar Yochai, the most famous of all of the caves in rabbinic literature, it seems to me. The place where Shimon Bar Yochai and his son hid, perhaps from the emperor who was looking to kill them, where they were fed by a miraculous tree that gave them carobs and a stream that gave them water. perhaps the cave in which he was buried, perhaps both of those caves really are the same cave. Perhaps the author of all these stories intends one cave. In any event, it does seem at the beginning of our story that it is a place of pilgrimage. At least it has gotten the attention of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. So let's look at it. Can you, if you're looking at the, well, if you're looking at the screen, can you read it easily, or shall we just, Rachel, can you just make that bigger? We don't need the, yeah, that's good. That's great. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi met Elijah while he was standing at the entrance of the cave of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. He asked Elijah, "Do I have a place in the world to come?" Elijah replied, "If the master desires it." Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said to himself, "I saw two, but I heard the voice of a third." He asked the prophet, "When will the Messiah come?" Elijah answered, "Go and ask him." Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi asked, "Where will I find him?" "He's sitting at the entrance of Rome." "And by what signs will I identify him?" "He sits among those who suffer with lesions. All of them unwrap and bind up their sores at the same time. But the one who is the Messiah unties and binds up one at a time, thinking, 'If I am summoned, I will not have to delay.'" Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi went to him and said, "Shalom Alecha, my master and teacher." The Messiah replied, "Shalom Alecha ben Levi." Rabbi Yehoshua asked, "When will the master come?" He replied, "Today." Rabbi Yehoshua returned to Elijah, who said to him, "What did he say to you?" "He said to me, 'Peace be upon you, ben Levi.'" Elijah explained, "Ah, with his greeting, he has promised both you and your father a place in the world to come." Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, "But he lied to me by saying, 'Today I will come,' but he's not come." Elijah replied, "He was quoting a verse. This is what he said to you, as it says in the Psalm, 'Today, if you will listen to his voice.'" There is the whole story. Something got your attention. I wonder what it was. It's a big knot, this story. There are lots of things about it that seem unclear or are teasingly multi-leveled, multi-layered. But where shall we start? Where shall we start? Where do you want to start? Somebody, anybody?
Yep.
Oh,
I think when he says, "if you will listen to his voice," what he's saying is that you have to take an active part in this. You can't just sit and expect it to come to you. Or to
Despite the fact, I love it, Marty, because you started right at the very end, which is oftentimes a really good place to start, despite anything that you might have learned in The Sound of Music, you know. Yeah, even though the Messiah told him he would come today, why wasn't the Messiah more explicit? We'll keep the question anyway in our pocket.
Yeah.
Somebody else.
Yeah, I was wondering if perhaps what the Messiah meant is that, or Elijah rather, saying that he will come when people are ready for him to come.
All right. Staying at the end of the story. Anybody else with a predicament? I love to think about the movie version of this story. I love to think about the movie version of so many things. Oh, Jane, were you starting to say something? You're muted.
How does he know, Rabbi, whether he has come or not?
How does he know?
Yes. Maybe
Rabbi
he
Yoshua
had-
ben Levi sees
maybe-
no evidence that the Messiah
but
has come,
maybe
apparently.
that's his limitation. It reminds me of some people say you make your own heaven or hell on earth.
Uh-huh. So what's Rabbi Yoshua been looking for?
Yes.
What's Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi looking for? Yeah, Jane, unmute yourself. There you go.
I had a problem with, and this just might be the translation, but in the beginning, going by the English,
Yeah.
I found a little bit of ambivalence in the placement. Okay, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi met Elijah while he was standing in the entrance of the cave. The entrance. When who was standing
Good
at the
question.
entrance of the cave?
Right. Yeah, who was there first?
Yeah, so I don't know whether this depends upon the translation, but it's ambiguous in the English.
It's delightfully ambiguous in both.
Oh,
There's a
Hunter
fog,
also
a fogginess of pronouns here.
that's right.
Yeah.
Steve,
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see Hunter also has her hand up.
I can't see. Oh, yes, I can. Hello, Hunter.
Okay.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Steve. I just was going to say, I just love the listen to his voice because it just really, I mean, if we want him to come or her to come, we all need to listen to her voice. And it just sort of struck me as a real mission. I was just so pleased to have that.
How do you listen? What are the signs that this one or that one is the Messiah?
I think you listen to the voice.
You listen to the voice, but when
And yet
Elijah,
he heard three voices,
yeah,
but only saw two. And I'm still not sure who the two are. I have to go back and work that out.
or what the third one is.
Is that another voice that he's either listening to or not listening to, or thinks he should listen to?
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. But
And
I'm
also,
thinking,
one of the two? Is he one of the two, or it is? When you asked, if we had any questions, I'm like, so many. Every verse there's another question. But and a lot of it is basic choreography. Who's speaking? Who went where? How many voices? He was called this here. He was called another thing there. It's interesting that most of my questions are about the choreography of the story and not the content of it, unless the choreography is the content.
oh, yeah. Is it all a story about the shift and about shifting meanings and shifting presence and quick shuttling between one scene and the other? We're not told, for example, how it is that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi got to Rome. The storyteller has collapsed this, sort of like A Wrinkle in Time, sort of like Madeleine L'Engle, has collapsed at the earth, or as the rabbis will talk about it, stepping off miles with one step, because God has wrinkled the earth underneath. It's like The Wrinkle in Time, has wrinkled the earth, folded the earth underneath the steps of the one making the pilgrimage, or the patriarch escaping for his life, and just so that Jacob will be able to stop in the right place to lie down, to have the dream that night where he will see the ladder ascending from the earth to the heavens. You got to get to that place, but you can't get there. It'll be noon tomorrow. No, it won't, because God is going to collapse the earth and he'll step off miles with a step. So how does Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi get there? And how does he get back? Adina has raised her hand. Yes.
It seems to me, I'm taking another aspect of this, that it's clear that Elijah is an expert of sorts, the one who supposedly has questions. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi keeps asking him questions, and he doesn't answer. Kind of doesn't answer. He's an intermediary. He really doesn't have answers. He sends him to find the answer. And he's at the threshold, sending him to another door, to another gate, but he doesn't really, he guides him, he directs him, but he doesn't really answer. And it's a very interesting technique and also a different role that Elijah is given.
It's
And
wonderful.
what is he doing at the graveside anyway? How did Elijah just end up right there at the entrance to that cave? But I think Errol has a question too.
Yeah, Errol.
Yeah, going to the very end, today, if you will listen to his voice, that makes it sound as if the Messiah, it's a personal Messiah, because Rabbi Ben Levi is not asking when is he may be asking when is the Messiah coming to the world, but the answer is it is up to you for you to receive the Messiah. You have to be open to it, to him or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a personal thing. It's not a universal appearance.
Yeah, that's right. What does Messiah actually mean in the context of this story? When we hear it and we're speaking English, we keep, the word is so freighted by the Christian religious narratives that frame Messiah in a particular way that always keeps it in art and in music and so on. For those of us who are not part of that world of religious imagination, we still know all the texts, right? We know all the songs. We know many of the stories. Many people have gotten them through music, as I say, through art or through film, graphic art, or through film or through sculpture and so on. Piece together and know different parts of the story, and certainly the motif of the Messiah in a Christian frame is something that that is very important in our American culture.
Yeah,
a culture that one of my Duke colleagues of blessed memory used to call the world of Americanity.
interesting. Steve,
Carol.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to know in the Aramaic or Hebrew, because I don't know how to scroll up to find it. What is the word they use for the master, for master and teacher? What terms do they use? Like Aviva Mori, or
I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. Okay.
The second line.
Okay.
The sentence that begins 4 words from the end. Im yirtze Adon hazeh. Adon. If the master desires it, if the master wants it. Yeah.
So does Adon here refer to Hashem? Who
no,
is?
It does not.
Oh, it does not. Okay.
It does not. Adon is a word that means sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
So what about the word mar that's farther down? Le'emat ate mar, does mar mean sir?
Yes. The function is yes. Yeah. ironically, chillingly similar to the abbreviation for Mr.
Yeah, that's right.
MR.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Harold.
Yeah, I'm impressed that Elijah answers questions in a way that kind of keeps frustrating the rabbi, but the rabbi asks questions that are about himself and doesn't really listen to what Elijah says, doesn't really listen to what the Messiah says, but he also has this weird way of hearing, he hears this third. I imagine that to be that Elijah is talking to someone who maybe is in the cave, but there's a third. I presume that third is the Messiah who's there and not there, just the way the time is wrinkled, these tesseracts, right? But anyway, I'm also impressed that the Messiah is listening carefully. He is listening to the summons that he might get at any moment. And he's really keen to listen for that. And it's a contrast to the way that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and I'm no good with Hebrew, but Yeshua sounds like God will save or God has saved.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is the same. It is the same name as Jesus.
Yeah, and that we have two models for listening. One muddled listening, which he's got an ear, but he hasn't trained it, and one who really is listening intensely, and is asking us to listen.
Yes. Thank you. When Elijah redirects Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, he says, you need to be not here at the entrance of the cave, but you need to be at the gates of Rome, at the entrance of the city, because that's where the Messiah is, at the entrance of the gates, in the gates of Rome. And so it's from one door to the next. If there's some redemptive possibility or redemptive redirection, it's happening at the door. Opportunity is knocking. Somebody's there first. In a movie version that I make in my head, it's Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi who's there first. And he has made some kind of pilgrimage. I'm making all of this part of it up, by the way, because the storyteller has only chosen this word and not another word, has only said that which is reported to us anyway. Anybody who has shaped the story along the way has become a storyteller, a tradent, an elaborator, an illuminator of the manuscript. As I make the movie version, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi has made his pilgrimage to the cave of Shimon Bar Yochai, the cave, perhaps the cave of dual purpose, where he was saved and survived with his son miraculously, and also where he was buried. In any event, he's standing there and meditating, having made his pilgrimage, and he's thinking very mortal thoughts. If this is the burial cave of Shimon Bar Yochai, he's thinking very mortal thoughts. Not surprised, perhaps, by Elijah, because unbeknownst to us, if we haven't read a lot of these stories about Elijah, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi seems to be a favorite of Elijah. They study together, they learn together a lot. They appear in a good number of stories. Elijah comes up behind him. And Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, again, this is my movie version, hears the footsteps of Elijah, and even without turning around, says, "Do I have a place in the world to come?" A question derived from the mortal thoughts that he's thinking as he stands in front of the burial cave. And Elijah replied, perhaps softly or perhaps loud enough anyway for his voice to reverberate from inside the cave, where a third voice might be perceived. Im yirtzeh adon hazeh, if the master desires it. And then Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says, again, in my movie version, he said to himself, all the action freezes on the, well, there's not that much going on the stage, but the spotlight narrows so that it only has Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, and Elijah freezes, and Yehoshua ben Levi says to us in the audience, methinks I heard a third voice, but there are only two of us in this conversation. And then the spotlight widens and the action becomes live and real once again. And he asked the prophet, when will the Messiah come? And Elijah gives him an astounding answer. And thanks to Adina for redirecting us, or just like Elijah redirects the thought and the movement of the reader of the story, the teller of the story, and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi within the story. When will the Messiah come? Elijah answered, go and ask him. Do you find that astounding?
Mhm.
Is that groundbreaking?
Yes.
Somebody want to say more about that?
Yeah,
Go and
well,
ask him.
yeah. I mean, I was struck by just where then you found the Messiah, or rather, where Rabbi Yehoshua found the Messiah at the gate, but also among the people who are suffering from a skin disease, presumably the outcasts. He was one of them, but you could also tell in the way he wasn't one of them.
Yes, that's true. But how about just the astounding nature of Elijah's response?
He's here. The Messiah's already here.
He's already here. He's already here. What are you looking for? And where would you look for it? Are you going to pray for it? Does it require? What does it require? Go and ask. You can't. You can engage the Messiah. This is extraordinary. He's already here, wherever here is, and where the here is.
Rome.
How about that in terms of
that's too.
Yeah, Ira.
Well, obviously, it's not in Israel. It's not in the Holy Land.
It's not in the Holy Land. It's not in a holy place.
In Rome.
It's precisely, Richard?
In Rome.
It's in Rome, the most powerful city in the world.
The most powerful city in the world, and the stylized, iconic arch enemy of Israel.
Yes.
Right? And everything that Israel stands for, and the nation that Rome is the oppressive power that resides in the land of Israel and encumbers the people of Israel. That's where you're going to find the Messiah. And not only there, but you're not going to find him in a palace, and you're not going to find him enshrined or enthroned any place. He's not a person of political or military power. He's not a player. He's sitting amongst the outcasts in this riot of colors and awful smells and money exchangers and flies and all this stuff that goes on in the gates of the city. The outcasts, those who suffer from skin diseases, who are too contagious to be allowed into the city. That's where you're going to find the Messiah. Well, there are tons of people out there like that. I remember in olden times, in my own olden times, which is to say, in the early 70s, early trips that I made to Israel, and I would go to Jerusalem, and I loved going in through one of the larger gates that always had people with had amputees and people with swollen this and suppurating wounds and sores and so on. Adina, you know what I'm talking about. And holding out their hands for some change. And it was just an awful sight. And there weren't even that many people who were there. There were 6, 7, 8, 10 people, maybe a dozen people. But I'm just imagining the gates of Rome and all of the traffic and all of the people. And how do you know one of them is the Messiah? Yeah, Adina.
I'm not sure if I'm right or not, but that for me, there is an echo of Jesus in Christianity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, these stories are,
Antichrist.
well, they're coming out, they're coming about, they're being told at the same time, really.
Right.
Post.
Yeah. Yeah, there's more there's certainly more to say about that. But the Messiah is the one who is, everybody else has the same way of dealing with their wounds. All of them wrap and bind up their sores at the same time. But the one who is the Messiah unties and binds up one at a time. So people have gauze or whatever, or strips of garments or something. One shudders to think of how unclean all of those strips of cloth were, and those bandages were. But apparently, as the storyteller offers it to us, all of these people suffering with these lesions would unwrap everything at the same time and then rewrap. And, says Elijah to Yoshua ben Levi, you'll find that one of them is different. He only unwraps one at a time. He's the only one you'll find who's unwrapping one at a time. And why? Because he's thinking, if I am summoned, I will not have to delay. Here at the time of the development of the Christian narratives as well, let me just offer you the following frame, put the following frame around the Messiah. We try to learn everything that we can about the Messiah from just one little line. We learn that he is not the Messiah because he suffers.
Right.
Everybody, all of them are suffering. He's not the Messiah because he suffers. He is the Messiah because he waits and he's tuned in. And he's always anticipating the call. That's what identifies him as the Messiah. His action towards that mindset. The one who is the Messiah unties and binds up only one at a time, thinking, if I am summoned, I will not have to delay. And here's another extraordinary element, a slim thread perhaps. We almost can't see it. We take it for granted maybe, but let's lay it bare and look at it in the light where we can actually see it glistening. That the Messiah knows that Yehoshua ben Levi is coming, or he recognizes Yehoshua ben Levi. So the story that we saw unfolding at the entrance of the cave is a story that the Messiah, sitting at the entrance of Rome, at the gates of Rome, at the door of Rome, seems to know also. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, we know what he's been told, but apparently the Messiah has been told something too, and maybe they're looking for each other. Or the one who is the Messiah understands how unique he is and knows, deeply knows, that the one who takes a curious and special look at him, because he's so different from everybody else, even while he's the same as everybody else, that person has a special intuition or some special knowledge. And perhaps this person who is dressed like a Jewish sage, perhaps the Messiah is just putting 2 and 2 together, or perhaps he's been told the story. That would be very interesting, an interesting backstory to tell. But in any event, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi went right up to him and said, Shalom Alecha, my master and teacher. And the Messiah replied, Shalom Alecha ben Levi. Rabbi Yehoshua asked, when will the master come? And he replied, today. And that is the end of that part of the story. It's the end of the scene. We're not told how Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi got back to Elijah. whether he's whisked through time and space back to the entrance of the cave of Shimon Bar Yochai, which is what it seems like, or whether Elijah appears there also at the gates of Rome. No, I think it's not. I think rather I prefer the first idea. What do you think?
Well,
I'd rather have the magic.
It says he returned to
It does. It does. You're right. Thanks for reading carefully. It says he returned to Elijah.
Earlier he asked when will Messiah come, and now he's asking when is the Master come. Is that
He's talking to the Messiah in the third person.
Or is he asking for now about Elijah, when my master and teacher?
Oh, yeah, we still have to reckon with that whole idea of who's the master, who's the teacher. If the master wants it so. Who is that master? Master is used in that kind of vague way by Elijah at the beginning of the story, but then Yoshua ben Levi harnesses that language and lists that language in the service of speaking to the Messiah. So there's another knot for us to untangle right there. In any event, we'll have to leave a lot of knots in the story, I suppose, because we only have another 15 minutes. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi returned to Elijah, who said to him, "What did he say to you?" He said, "Shalom alecha ben Levi." Elijah explained, "With his greeting, he has promised both you and your father a place in the world to come." How? What? What's Elijah?
Well, he names throughout the story is Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, and here the Messiah only says ben Levi, only calls him as the son of his father. And when Rabbi Yoshua answers, he answers just as Rabbi Yoshua without the ben Levi part. So there's a whole bunch going on there.
So the Ben Levi, he's the Ben Levi, and Levi is his father's name. And so that seems to be a piece of it. What did he say to you? He said, "Shalom alecha ben Levi." With his greeting, he has promised both you and your father a place in the world to come.
Which answered the very first question at the beginning of the story.
Right.
Yeah.
A place in the world to come.
That's right.
Yeah. Who said that's right?
I did, Ira.
Oh, Ira. Yes.
So essentially his initial question, his primary question, was answered.
Yeah, apparently, although he didn't know it.
Well, he was by that time he was focused on the Messiah, not on his initial question.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. He's got that question. It's another interesting connection between Elijah and Passover, not only the doorway, but questions. And what do you do with questions? What does Elijah do with questions? What Dina helped us to see before, Elijah turns questions into quests. Elijah lays bare the quest at the root, or that motivates the question, whatever the question happens to be. And Yoshua ben Levi didn't even know that wasn't even focused on that. But Elijah remembered the question. What did you go there to find out? You made a pilgrimage to talk to the Messiah, and you forgot what you wanted to ask him? Well, but he answered you anyway. When he said, "Shalom alecha," and "Shalom alav," let's say, "Alav hashalom." When do we say "Alav hashalom"? Unless you're from from Errol's part of the world, in which case you would say Olav Shalom, right? Which
Right.
which is something that you would say after you mention the name of the dearly departed.
Mhm.
Alav Hashalom, peace be upon him. Alav Hashalom. Shalom Alecha, there will be shalom upon you, and also on Levi, your father. That's how Elijah's interpreting, that's how he hears the Messiah. Did the Messiah actually say that, or did Elijah just hear it? Or is that the voice of the third? Is that the third voice that Yoshua ben Levi heard and told us about in the middle of that story, freezing all other action and all other discourse? I think I hear a third voice. There's another
So
voice.
could that third voice somehow be Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai? I mean, why do we need to know that it's his grave? Why couldn't they just be at a cave somewhere? He doesn't enter into the rest of the story, does he? But is his voice somehow heard in some way?
Well, Sabina, you know what? Now I'm going to have to tell you another story.
I'm afraid.
Yeah.
That tone of voice, I'm sure I did something wrong.
No, you didn't do anything wrong, but this is just like feeding my nicotine habit. You know, I don't smoke, but I figure, you know, maybe I'll start. And it's hard to find, but it's hard to find a support group for starting to smoke. So I haven't done it yet. There are all kinds of online groups, but there are no groups about. But I have this other kind of habit of lighting one story off the burning embers of the one that I've just finished. And Sibi, you're actually feeding that addiction. But here's the story. It's a very short story. Elijah was sitting and studying with Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, and they got to a tradition that had been taught by Shimon Bar Yochai, and it was very perplexing to them. And Yehoshua ben Levi said to Elijah, "I don't understand it." And Elijah said, "Well, there's the master sitting over there. Let's go and ask him." And they go over to ask him. Well, that's the beginning of the story. Never mind the ending of the story, but it's enough of the story for right now to get to what Sibi triggered in my mind, which is that Shimon Bar Yochai had already been dead for 150 years. So there's the master. Let's go. There he is. Let's go ask him what this means. And they go over and they ask him. And just another little bit of the story. Shimon Bar Yochai says to Elijah, "Who's that who's with you?" And he says, "It's Yoshua ben Levi, the greatest of his day, the greatest student of his day." So here's Elijah as the great teacher who can move aside history in a certain way and get you to talk to Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln in the same room at the same time. Never mind the constraints of chronology. What they have to say enlivens them and brings them right into the same room. If you have the right teacher, it can happen. So is Shimon Bar Yochai part of this conversation, echoing in the cave? That's one of the strata of all of this geology of Elijah and Elijah stories. Maybe so. But back to this story. He said to me, "Peace be upon you, Ben Levi." Elijah exclaimed, "With his greeting, he has promised both you and your father a place in the world to come." Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, "But he lied to me, saying, 'Today I will come.'" Now, we didn't even hear that in the story. We're getting that through reflection. We're getting that in the mirror. We're getting that as recall. What is Yoshua ben Levi?
I thought he did ask him.
Did he get that answer? Today?
It's applied today, right? Or am I thinking of a different?
Today, you're right. No, he did say it. You're right. The Messiah replied, Shalom Alecha ben Levi. Oh, no, that's the report that comes.
Rabbi,
We don't hear about him.
Oh.
He did say it. When will the master come? Today.
Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi went and said to him, Shalom Alecha, my master and teacher. And the Messiah replied, Shalom Alecha ben Levi. Yeshua said, when will the master come? He replied, today. Yes, of course, of course. Shuttling back and forth in this story in such a way that I delightfully didn't remember the story. It's just great because then I get to discover it all over again. Thanks to you.
It just seems astounding to me that right after finding out that he and his father will in fact have the life in the world to come,
yes.
that he would go to lying as a way of explaining that the Messiah has not come today. It seems like an extraordinary thing for a rabbi to say about his teacher or his master or his Messiah or.
Very nice. There was somebody else? I heard another voice, a third voice.
See it differently. I see it differently.
Yeah.
I mean, Rabbi's disappointment is about the urgency of now. That's one thing to tell me in the future, I have a place to come to the world. It's not a small thing, but it's distant, it's remote. It's another thing to say the time is now. And I can understand why the rabbi would be disappointed.
He didn't say it's now. He essentially said it's up to you.
He said today.
Yeah, today, not now.
Today, if you will listen. Today was just the beginning of the phrase.
Yes, apparently, that's how Elijah. Thank you, Ira, for insisting about the urgency of now rather than the desire for the world to come. And if Yoshua ben Levi used to think that the Messiah was in some other world or yet to be in the world, Elijah disabused him of that notion by saying, no, you're standing at the entrance of the cave and he is sitting at the entrance of Rome. He's sitting at the door. And it's now. It's now. And so the urgency of now, that's a really good turn of phrase. I hope I remember it. I'm glad we're recording this.
Martin Luther King. It comes from Martin Luther King.
Martin Luther King through you, Ira. Okay.
Steve Unruh, I think, wanted to say something.
Yes.
I'm confused that the rabbi is talking to the Messiah and says, talking to the Messiah, but really, when's the Messiah going to come? And the Messiah's right in front of him. And then the Messiah says, today, because I'm the Messiah. You're talking to me.
Well, yeah, that's right.
And he still wants to know, like, you can't possibly be the actual Messiah. When's the actual Messiah going to come?
Do you think this has to do with when you were saying that this person, he found this person in Rome, and I'm thinking that was the diaspora of the time. That's the community outside of Israel. So is he saying, when are you going to come to Israel and be a part of our community? Is that sort of what?
When will the redemption come?
When will
redemption come to Israel?
When will the Messiah? When will the effect of the Messiah in the world be manifest in a way that redeems the religious community or the community of Israel, let's say. Apparently the Messiah is there unbinding and binding one wound at a time because he's waiting for a summons. And Yoshua ben Levi coming and asking him shilas, asking him questions is not the summons, apparently. Who knows what the summons is? The Psalm verse is in the plural. So y'all have to listen to his voice. It's conditional upon a y'all. So Steve Unruh, you have laid bare another interesting tension here about anticipation and about now and about future and about the effects of the Messiah. And how are they felt in the world of living experience, and all of that needs to be and still is hidden and curled up here inside the chrysalis of this story. All we know is that Elijah teaches in the final minutes. I would say all we know, if the curtain starts to come down, is that Elijah teaches Yeshua ben Levi, that the Messiah speaks in code, or the Messiah speaks only in short phrases or elusive. His presence is elusive and his words are elusive. And when he said today, he said, "I'll come today," and Elijah says, "No, you weren't listening with your third ear, let's say. You weren't listening with the third ear. You have to know how to hear. You have to know how to see him among the crowd and know how to identify him. And you have to listen with your inner ear, let's say, or with some other element that helps you hear and perceive." The Messiah said, "You and your Father will have a place in the world to come." You didn't get that from what he said. And he didn't say he would come today. He's quoting a pasuk. This is how the Messiah, he's quoting a verse from the Psalms, because that's what you would expect from, that's what Elijah says, that's the way he talks. What are you going to do? That's the way the Messiah talks. And it is there that the curtain comes down. And here Elijah, this liminal character, for whom time and space are conventions to which he is no longer obligated in a way, helps remove the veil of distance, and from one doorway to another doorway, when opportunity knocks, you can go and you can ask the Messiah, but only if you look for the Messiah apparently in the most unexpected places. And the answers that hold the key to some kind of redemption, you wouldn't expect that was actually an answer that you got at the end of the story, but it was. So there is much to think about and to meditate on between one doorway and another. And I think we'll have to put a bookmark in the conversation, lest we get the reputation of a group that goes on just too long for people. It's easier to it's easier to choose another Elijah story. They're easy to find. Right before Passover, they seem to crop up like mushrooms on a rainy end of February day, and where it's starting to get warm. And there'll be another one that will perhaps help you at your Passover celebration. And we'll see. But for now,
and I hope you don't mind if I add just a couple of things, because I've added a few more resources to the page where it's on the actually it's on the Bethel website, but it's Learn With Us, and then it talks about engaging with Rabbi Sager. On that page, there's just a wealth of information. Most of the videos of all these conversations that you've done about doors and doorways, and some resources which include haiku and some pictures and a painting by Sue Clapper and a new haiku by Arna and some other haikus by people that have sent them in. Susan Breitzer sent one in, and also a picture of the mezuzah hand sanitizer that I showed you last week. So we tried to take a picture of it so you could see it there. So go and enjoy and see some of those resources that we have.
Are there some poems by Mary Oliver on that page too?
There are. We added those today. You haven't used them in class, but they are amazing accompaniments to the things that we've been talking about.
Yes.
Seems like every time we find another door resource, we try to add it there. So they all seem to kind of go together, hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
you,
Great class.
Rabbi.
Pleasure, a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Happy Purim.